Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest, a man in long-term recovery, celebrated 51 years last December. Been at this thing for a while, and the idea behind these podcasts is to share with you some of the things that I've learned along the way regarding AA history, psychology, spirituality, things that I hope will be of some help to you as you work the 12-step program of recovery. And we're continuing with our series now on spiritual evolution, taking a deep dive into a book by the same name, written by a man by the name of George Vaillant. He was a research psychiatrist at Harvard, served there for many years, and was also a non-alcoholic trustee on the board of Alcoholics Anonymous. His work really helped me to come to a deeper, richer understanding of the word spirituality. You know, I think we toss that word around quite a bit, but his book helped me to go a little deeper into what is the real meaning of spirituality. It's kind of loosey-goosey the way we use it. And he defines spirituality as, quote, an amalgam, a collection, a gathering of positive emotions. In other words, I think you could say it's the sum total of our spiritual condition. And in his first three chapters, he locates spirituality in the brain. And as the brain has evolved to accommodate these more mature and better evolved emotions within human beings. So he described faith, love, hope, joy. We've been through those. And in this episode, we're going to take a deep dive into a topic of compassion. And like each of the other positive emotions, Vaillant says we're evolving more so. We're becoming more loving, more trusting, more forgiving. And now what does it mean to become more compassionate? And, you know, today I think we're seeing suffering on a pretty grand scale. It's always been there. But now we're watching it on TV where the pain of the world is coming into our living rooms. We see it, we feel it. I remember reading Ram Dass many years ago. He said he was suffering from compassion fatigue. You know, it's like, how much of this pain can I absorb? Well, that's a good question. Perhaps the more you're able to absorb without going down under the weight of it is a measure of our maturity, our spiritual maturity. So there's lots of stuff that's coming at us: earthquakes, tsunamis, mass killings, wars, and we're confronted with these tragedies, and our hearts are either hardened to it and block it out, or it's softening us up and making us attentive to all the pain that is out there in the world. And, you know, the closer it is to home, the more difficult it is to avoid it. You know, the more compassionate we can become, the more pain we can include within our inner circle. Our circle expands. If it's just I care about my family and that's it, that's one way of doing it. But it's not very mature. It's not very developed. So we want to expand that circle in our own spiritual growth. George begins by trying to define compassion, and much like some of the others, he said, well, let me tell you what it's not, you know, because sometimes it's difficult to describe. And he starts by saying that it's very different from love. He says, love is the desire to join with someone who is appealing. Compassion is the desire to separate someone who is suffering from their pain, even if they are unappealing. So he goes on to say, love and compassion are different. Love is based on attachment. And so the loss of the loved one produces the very self-absorbed suffering and grief from which the Buddha tried to protect us by teaching detachment. You know, Al-Anon has an expression, detach with love. That you can detach in coldness, but how do you hold the balance of detaching but remaining in love and extending love? He writes, snatch a loved object away from its lover, be it a toddler's lollipop, a mother's bear cub, or a patriot's freedom. And the result is a flood of all about me negative emotions of protest, anger, grief, and terror. The loss of a loved one, no matter how unselfishly loved, produces pain and self-absorption. That is how the brain is wired. In contrast, he writes, the pain of compassion based on empathy and not sympathy focuses us inexorably on the other. It's outwardly directed. Compassion and empathy allow us to hold the other benevolently in mind and even to run towards another's suffering. He gives an example of someone who's in an automobile accident. He says, imagine yourself being in that situation. Your leg is broken, right? And who do you hope is coming in the next car coming to see you? Would you want it to be your mother or a paramedic? He says both would feel your pain, but, quote, fueled by her great love, your mother would be immobilized by her pity, her sympathy, and her own pain. In contrast, the paramedic would empathetically understand your suffering and would then dispassionately splint your fractured leg so that you could be moved with the least amount of pain. He says something very interesting here. He says compassion allows us to feel seen, our situation appreciated and understood. And if there's a way to alleviate it, we do it. And this chapter on compassion reminds me so much of the material and the reality that we deal with in the 12th step. It's a moving outward from ourselves, having had a spiritual experience or awakening as a result of these steps. What did we do? We extend the healing outward to others. It's a natural flow. Vaillant says it's not enough to feel another's pain. To feel compassion is not only to resonate with their pain, but to do something about it. So real compassion leads to action. And he makes a comment here, not just to prayer. And again, I think this is something that we find in 12-step communities. Dr. Bob's wife was fond of the letter to James. She would end her little morning meetings with the guys when they were over at the Smith's house drinking coffee. Faith without works is dead. Love and service are our code. Meaning we're not going to be navel gazers. It's not going to be a kind of spirituality that just stays with us. Oh, we become holy, holy, holy. No, we've locked on to something, we've discovered something, or something has discovered us, and now we're compelled to bring that out to other people. All right? So, and this is where our self-centeredness needs to be recognized, needs to be addressed, because we all suffer from it. You know, egotism in one way, shape, or form. It ain't over with any of us. And unconsciously, as a psychiatrist, he's big on the unconscious. He says we try to protect ourselves from pain and suffering. We turn away from it through our defense mechanisms. And we've all got defense mechanisms. He lists 3 of them. Projection. We don't want to feel the pain. We don't want to feel the suffering. So we blame someone else for our problems. The test was unfair. The devil made me do it. My misery is all your fault. All right? To me, I had an expression I used for a long time. Happiness is finding someone to pin it on, someone to blame. And then once you start getting in touch with this psychological dynamic that we all suffer from, we rather than look at the pain, rather than look at the suffering, rather than feel for the other person, we blame them, and we separate ourselves from them. It's their fault. We stop listening to one another. Listening is an art. We want to be seen. We want desperately to be heard. And what is true for us is also true for our unconscious. The unconscious wants to be heard. It doesn't want to be pushed down. It doesn't want to be repressed. It wants to be acknowledged, just like people want to be acknowledged. I don't know that we so much want to be fixed as we want to be heard, understood. Vaillant uses the term to be seen, to be seen. So listening is an art, and to listen to people, to listen to ourselves. That's how I always start my two-way prayer with the 10th step. Don't go praying until you know what's going on. Listen to myself. Listen to what's going on inside of me. What is needing to be heard, to be recognized, to be acknowledged, to be honestly brought up and kind of put on the table there. So people in the unconscious and God are pretty similar in that dynamic. Another self-absorbed defense mechanism, throwing a temper tantrum, violence in the home, violence on the world stage, hatred, revenge. Most of these come from the pressure that builds up of being locked inside of self. It's kind of like a volcano, pushing it down. I don't want to see it. I don't want to acknowledge it. I don't want to be honest about it, but it's building there inside of me. And then there comes an explosion. And it may feel good. Actually, it does feel good to get the anger and the rage out. But it ain't healthy. It's destructive. And we as a society have to stop doing it that way. And, we as individuals in recovery have to stop doing it that way. We have to grow up emotionally and spiritually. I think the book is absolutely right that, resentment festers and then it explodes. And we wonder, why did I get drunk? Why did I go out and use? If I learn to deal with what's going on deep inside me and grow up spiritually, and spiritual emotions. Remember, that's what he's talking about, spiritual emotions, developing positive spiritual emotions. This is maturity. I mean, I'll do my work. I'll see my stuff. It's not that all the problems have gone away. It's that I'm dealing with them. And that's a mature reaction. And the third is somewhat similar. It's dissociation, disconnectedness. I leave the scene. We go get drunk. We shoot up. I go eat myself to death. I don't face the suffering that is going on inside of me. Instead, I run. And some of us have a long ways to go in kind of coming back, especially if you're a trauma survivor. It's like we dissociate from our bodies. We dissociate from our emotional life. It's like we're disconnected out there. And it's going to take some time for us to kind of come together, to rejoin. And for me, again, two-way prayer is what fosters this, because I now have a companion who's helping me to know that it is safe to do this work. It is safe to be me. Why? I am heard. I am seen. I am acknowledged. I am loved. By what? By the God within, the voice within. That's why it's so terribly important. We rediscover this lost art that they had in the early days of AA. Free me from the bondage of self. No truer words, I think, were ever spoken. God makes that possible. It's what the book says. So sometimes it's the only thing that makes it possible is this God image that we are each working in our own way to establish a relationship with. So Vaillant, first he looks at the defense mechanism, then he looks at their opposites. And these become a spiritual sign of a maturing evolution of our spirituality. What are they? First one he says is altruism, recognizing the needs of others as well as my own. And he says every religious tradition focuses on this. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Love thy neighbor as thyself. I always add, and thyself. Love thy neighbor and thyself. That's growing in maturity. The second one, a little unusual, but I thought about it, makes some sense, is humor. That we need to learn how to laugh at ourselves. This self who took itself so seriously. We need to learn to stand outside and look in. Learn not to take ourselves as seriously as so many of us do. And then through humor, to help others do the same. There's a lot of laughter in 12-step meetings, a lot of laughter, humor in recovery. Book says we are not a glum lot. We insist upon having fun. But that laughter, you have to be careful, because I think Vaillant's right and AA is right on this, but the laughter can cover over the pain too. So there has to be a balance with these things. I was watching YouTube the other day, watching Robin Williams, some old films of him on the Johnny Carson show and doing some stand-up stuff. One of the funniest men that I've ever encountered. Just goes, and pretty soon you're laughing and rolling on the floor. He learned from Jonathan Winters, another, for you older folks out there, also funnier than hell. But both of them tragic characters who helped other people to laugh because they were so sensitive to catching things that were inside of them and bringing them up. But they didn't bring up the pain. Well, this is judgmental on my part. I don't know. Maybe they tried. I'm sure they did try, but they didn't succeed. Both suicides, both hurting souls. It's a nice expression in AA. Lord, teach us to laugh again, but don't let us forget that we cried. Now that's a mature spirituality. And that's compassion for one's self. And I think this is where the inner child work comes in. I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but I think two-way prayer leads to inner child work. We get discovered by God. We get loved upon by God. He feels our pain, recognizes us, sees us, hears us. And now we need to mirror that. And we need to do that with the stuck parts of us that we left behind when we got hurt as children. And I've run into very few people in recovery who were not damaged in growing up, or maybe better said, in not growing up, that they got stuck. And that stuckness is personified in the inner child. To go back, once I've learned two-way prayer, and do inner child work, to talk to the kid just as God talks to us. It's the next stage. Just like Wilson said, the next stage in recovery is emotional sobriety, growing up, becoming mature. I think that's exactly what Vaillant is trying to get at here. That inside there's this hurting kid, and what he most wants to be is recognized, seen, heard. Allow him to speak. What's going on in there? How are you doing today? And Jung had a brilliant insight. He said, the way we treat the unconscious is the way the unconscious will treat us. If we allow it to be heard, to be seen, to be recognized, we have then set up the dynamic for transformation, for the change to happen. The third element, positive, he says, is called sublimation. He writes this: artists are artists and not just doodlers, because they can empathetically understand that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, not just their own, and that truth, not self-comforting delusion, is beauty. He goes on, Ludwig van Beethoven and Eugene O'Neill alleviated their own misery by transmuting it into exactly what a waiting world wished to hear and see. The men and women who deploy the largely involuntary, compassionate, and empathetic coping mechanisms of humor, altruism, and sublimation enjoy far happier lives than those who deploy the less mature and more self-centered coping mechanisms. But, he notes, when asked for the causes of their behavior, the experts at empathy and the exemplars of compassion explain that they do not act through, quote, conscious, morally reasoned planning, but because to do anything else would be impossible. They often remain unconscious that they once suffered the very pain they're trying to relieve. Such transformation of human pain into empathetic connection reflects human neurobiology at its most glorious. Our pain becomes the key to understanding the pain of other people. We know how they feel. They feel like we do or did. And we need to then let them get in touch with that. Not to take it away from them, but to let them hurt and be heard in their hurting. When you go to see a psychiatrist or a counselor, what is she or he going to say? Tell me more. And how do we feel? We feel heard, recognized. Can't fix us, but we can be heard by someone. And that's everything. That's compassion. All right? That's compassion. So Wilson did a lot of experimenting, particularly in the early days of AA. At first they set a bunch of rules about who's acceptable and who's not acceptable. Who are we going to have compassion on and who not? And what they learned in time was, if compassion is operating rather than rules, if love and compassion are being felt and recognized and operationalized in the meeting, healing is going on. But in the beginning, they tried to restrict it. Our little circle will be just so wide. And if you fit within that circle, we'll allow you in. We'll love you. Same damn thing we do with ourselves. I'll accept myself in this regard. But if I stretch to this, where part of me wants to kill somebody, you're out. That gets denied. That gets pushed down. Well, sometimes we do. And if I can allow that darkness into consciousness, it's 90% of the battle right there. I don't have to act on it. I shouldn't act on it. But I can't deny it and I can't push it down. So there's a lovely thing in the 12 and 12 where they kind of describe this as the requirements for AA membership. I always thought it was really funny, so I'll share that one. He says, we were resolved to admit nobody to AA, but that hypothetical class of people we termed pure alcoholics, except for their guzzling and the unfortunate results thereof. They could have no other complications. So beggars, tramps, asylum inmates, prisoners, plain crackpots, and fallen women were definitely out. Yes, sir, we'd cater only to pure and respectable alcoholics. Any others would surely destroy us. Besides, if we took those odd ones, what would decent people say about us? Intolerant, you say? Yes, we were intolerant. All right. Compassion. One of the things that they learned from this is if compassion was what was operational. I mean, there's a famous one where it said, someone comes in, I don't know what the problem was. It doesn't really matter. But they got together because he wanted in. And they say, should we let him in? They kind of got behind the scenes, held a meeting, and the question became, what would the master do? What would the master do? Would he let them in? And the answer was yes. End of discussion. End of discussion. Same thing is operational with these shadow parts of ourselves. Will we let them in? Will we recognize them? Will we let them be seen and heard? That's the inner work that I think two-way prayer leads us to. I want to close with a short two-way prayer from a friend. I told her I was writing about compassion, and she read me her writing for that day. And Jung is a great believer in synchronicity, and so am I, that there's really one mind at work in this world, and you're just amazed when something just kind of pops along, and you say it's accidental. Maybe not. Maybe there's something that's weaving its way through our consciousness, and we're joined at that level of consciousness. So it's a friend of mine. She's a Jewish woman. She's in Al-Anon. I did a two-way prayer podcast with her several months ago because she's one of the most beautiful two-way prayer writers I've ever come across. Mine are not nearly as lovely as hers. She's got a real gift for it. I'm encouraging her to write a book. So she calls her God connection Hashem. So she says, good morning, Hashem. Feeling inward. What needs to be exposed? Please guide me. Hashem speaks. Ah, my beautiful daughter, my child, breathe. Stay here, just like this. Drop the jaw. The jaw holds so much. Let it go, loose. Feel the space all around you, boundless space. Keep your attention right here, my love, and let the heaviness draw you down, draw you inward. The day has broken, and it wants your attention. It can wait. We can't wait. More and more you see that we are a suffering God, and in this, a holy space, dwells all the agonies and all the beauties. This is where compassion truly resides, in us, the ultimate compassion. Through the collective suffering, it is how you know us. It is the place we meet. And in this, some strange mutation occurs, transcends into a beauty otherwise unknown. In this knowledge of profound suffering, with all its entanglements, all of its sorrows, we are present. Do not judge us or project on us what you would want us to be. Just be with us. Be with all. And whatever the worry of the day, allow it to move through. Everything is momentary, my love. Every single thing is momentary. So choose well. We did. We're in you, inside the suffering. Compassion, two parts of two Latin words, com and passion. Passion is the word for suffering, and com is the word for to be together with. To be together with in suffering. That's compassion. Not to fix it, but to be there present with it. What I got out of her two-way prayer and what I've gotten out of my own studies of Christianity, which isn't exactly what I was given when I was a kid and growing up, is that God is present and with us in our suffering. And we need to find that space where God is with us. We need to get honest about our suffering, about our pain, and then to be even with ourselves and have compassion on ourselves. And if we have that, then we will have it and extend it out to other people. And our circle will grow. Our hearts will expand, and our spirituality, as Vaillant would say, will be enhanced. There's a world of suffering. There's a world of hurt that is out there. Start your circle. Find somebody who's in worse shape than you are and extend to them your presence. Hear them. Be with them. All right? You don't have to fix them, but you do have to open your heart and allow them in. And then over time, grow that circle. You'll feel pressure. I want to go this far. I love alcoholics, but those damn drug addicts. Well, no, we got to let the drug addicts in. Okay, I love the drug addicts, but those damn food addicts. No, we got to let the food addicts in too. It's like the ripple in a pond. It goes out, goes further, and further. That's compassion. That's God with us, suffering along with us. If God is not suffering along with us, there's a cruelty to this world that I just find unacceptable. But a God with, suffering with, feeling the pain, feeling the hurt, I can relate to that. I hope you found this series helpful. It's the longest one I've ever done on a book, but I just find that each chapter has some important lessons for me, and I hope for you. So, hope this was helpful. If it was, keep coming back. God bless. Take care.